supporting you in your dog parenting journey. The Dynamic Dog Owner with Debbie Potter. Hello and welcome to this week's episode of The Dynamic Dog Owner, the podcast designed to support you in your dog parenting journey. Today, Tash is joining us, our trainer, because she has exciting news and we'll be welcoming a puppy into the Potter Paws family in the next few weeks. So today we're going to talk about puppies, welcoming them, preparing them, the excitement about getting a puppy. So morning, Tash.
Good morning.
So tell us firstly a little bit about the new puppy we are expecting.
Very exciting. So the new puppy that we are expecting in a couple of weeks, he is another English Springer Spaniel, so taking me to 3 of them for my sins. He's a boy. He is called Barney. He'll be 8 weeks old when we pick him up, which is very exciting. And I found out the other day through good old Facebook memories, weirdly, I think, as I've said to you, he's the same collar colour as Murphy was when we got him as a puppy. But we're also picking him up on exactly the same day that we picked Murphy up 5 years ago.
Oh, that's cute.
I don't know, it's just really weird. And I've got an orange cup as well. Orange is clearly the colour.
When we got Dave, we brought him home, like obviously many years later, but on exactly the same day as we got Leo.
Did you?
So it's meant to be then.
It is meant to be. How spooky.
So obviously we've got 2 weeks until he arrives.
Yes.
So there's lots of things going on behind the scenes. So we're just going to talk all things puppy, really. And obviously see how the conversation goes. It might go off on a tangent. So
usually does.
Wait, no, no. Now, obviously yours are current, all your dogs you've had before. Let's start with that. 2 of them rescues. And Murphy was a little bit older, wasn't he, when you got him?
Yeah, we picked him up at 13 weeks, purely because of holidays and things.
So this is the first time you're having a 8-week-old puppy.
A tiny puppy.
That 4 weeks makes a big difference, you know, from like your puppy experience with Murph, 12 weeks old, getting him to 8 weeks old. Is there anything in that you're kind of going, oh, makes you worry a little bit about things that are going to be slightly different, or do you think it's going to be an advantage? What are your thoughts on that period?
I mean, there's always that worry, isn't there, of, oh my God, am I going to break the puppy? Am I going to do something really wrong? But no, I think on the whole, I think, you know, I look back and I think it's fair to say Murph was my first puppy and there were elements that I found really hard, if I'm honest. But I think 5 years down the line, obviously, I know a bit more. I've learnt more from these 2. So I wouldn't say there's necessarily anything I'm nervous about this time. I think in my head, I just plan on doing things a bit differently. Like, not that I regret things I did with Murph, don't get me wrong, but I think there were things I could have done more of. So I think I focused a lot on, you know, kind of a lot of what the book said you should do when you bring a puppy home in terms of routines, and, you know, you have to kind of enforce timeouts, and you have to put them in a crate for them to sleep, and you have to do this and you have to do that. And I think I tried to stick to it very religiously and put too much pressure on it. So I think what I'm excited for this time is almost putting less pressure on it and just enjoying it, doing what is right for him. And I think little things like I tried to take Murphy out with me, you know, for kind of that socialization before he could go for walks, but I don't think I did it enough, and I don't think I did it in the right places. So I'm looking forward to this time to taking Barney out more in the right places and just getting him used to kind of the world and watching things a bit more than worrying about the pressure of him meeting people as much.
Yeah. No, I think that's good points, because you know, obviously any puppy book you read says you must do this and you must do that, and you know, it does put a lot of emphasis on the things that perhaps in hindsight you go, actually they weren't very important. like, as you say, things like crate training, or getting a schedule if they're going out for a wee and getting a routine. I don't know about you, I'm not a very routine driven person. I like to go with the flow. But yeah, I see your point. Obviously, apart from the socialization of getting out and seeing more people, is there anything else that you go, I'm not doing that this time, I'm going to do it differently?
Um, I think, I think just silly little things like last time I was really I was really kind of quite strict on crate training last time.
Mhm.
And so out of my two, Murph, who I've had since a puppy, I tried with, but I think I put too much pressure on it from day one because, everywhere said that your dog should be crate trained. I put too much pressure on it from day one, and I think we broke the relationship that he had with the crate down, and he'll go in one, but he hates the door being shut. I mean, he goes in one in the boot, but contextually that's different and he's quite happy.
Yeah.
And I think I broke that relationship down, and it put a lot of pressure on me, and I felt that I had failed in that sense. And then obviously I got Coco as a rescue rehome at 1.5, and she was crate trained. And I, don't get me wrong, I massively see the benefit of having a dog that is crate trained, because there are times when it has been really, really useful with her. So I think for me, that's a big one that I'm going to do differently. I have a crate. I'm going to try it, but I'm not necessarily going to put so much emphasis on it that if it goes wrong, I'm going to beat myself up about it.
Hmm.
So I think that for me, that's a big one that I look back on and go, I didn't do that right.
I think
Um,
that's fair. A lot of people put a lot of pressure on crate training. All three of mine are not crate trained. Not one of them is. But contextually, in the car, in the van, will happily chill out in a crate.
mm,
I've never felt the need to have crates in the home. I suppose crates are, when you think about it, crates are a very modern thing for dogs, aren't
yeah.
they? I grew up with dogs obviously all my life, and we never had a crate, never even heard of a crate. You're like, what? What do you want a crate for? But like you, when Dave was the first of puppies, what's that, 7 years ago? It said, crate training. And I bought a crate and I put it in the kitchen, and I thought, how I can't keep this in here forever because it's massive.
Well, that's the
Um,
other thing. They take up so much space. Like
exactly. If you've
you've
got
got
three
to
dogs,
clear
three of
half a
them.
room just to
Yeah.
put it in.
I found out. I thought, I'll give it a go. Within a couple of weeks, Dave was just going in the crate to pee and then leaving again. I was like, I'm effectively just giving him a toilet. And that's why I was like, nah, this isn't for me. And I got rid. And I put one up with Rem very briefly, never used it, and I didn't even bother with Fred. For me, it's not something I need, but you're right. A lot of emphasis is put on crate training, but it's not important for everyone.
No, I think, people see it very much as a safe place for their dog. And I think I understand that. And as I say, Coco's got a very good relationship with a crate. When we first got her, she came into season very quickly. And obviously at the time, I had Murph, who was entire, and I had Rufus, who wasn't, he was neutered, but still I had two boys and I had her. And, in that sense, the crate was very
Mm.
beneficial at times. And obviously, there have been other times where she's come to events and demoed for us in scent work, and having somewhere that she can go and chill out in between has been immensely helpful. But then on the flip side, Murph has got his safe place. It's under our bed, always has been ever since he was a puppy. But from day one, he's enjoyed chilling out on the sofa, and that's where he's just curled up and slept quite happily. And for me, that doesn't bother me. If that's where you're comfortable and that's where you want to chill out, that's cool. It
Mhm.
it it doesn't matter to me. I much prefer pens, which again, looking around the room, I'm having to clear a bit of space for. But I much prefer having a pen because I think it's so much more open. It's more of a barrier than I don't know, it just
Mm.
feels
You
less
can make it
kind of,
quite inclusive rather than it being shoved
yeah.
in a corner. It can be in the middle of the house. The puppy feels like they're in the middle and the thick of stuff. It's just they can't get to the wires or. cause any mischief.
Completely. Like I plan in our living room, the pen's going to be set up next to the sofa. So in theory, if we're all sat on the sofa, if he's not for any reason, he's right next to us, so he feels like he's part of it.
Mm.
But then equally, if I need to, I can open the pen up to have it in, whatever shape, straight line or whatever, just as a barrier across the room so that my older dogs can be one side whilst he's
Mm.
out the other side as well. So it just feels far more inclusive, as you say, rather
Yeah.
than shutting the puppy away.
Mm. And I think when you've got a multi-dog household as well, that's really important because if things like meal times, for example, Jim, all my three eat together. They're quite happy with eating together. There's no issues with them eating their dinners together. But when they're young, the puppy obviously needs to learn a few manners about, come on, you don't steal each other's food,
Of
you eat your
course.
bowl and you disappear. A pen is a really nice way to integrate that. A pen is a nice way to go, look, you can be next to each other chilling, you don't have to be bouncing all over each other. And I think it's a nice way of actually having that openness. You're in the space, but there's a barrier to stop you pestering the others, which is really important for in terms of building relationships
Hmm.
from the off. I always remember when we got, obviously I've only had the current three I've had have all been really young and interesting and playful when they've had a puppy. But when I got Dave, I probably left it way too late. Leo was 13. So he was an older dog going, what the hell have you brought this thing home for? I mean, he loved him, but he was like, give me a break. The puppy playpen wasn't necessarily used to keep Dave contained, it was to protect Leo. And we'd put the puppy playpen around his bed while Leo was asleep. Puppy had free run of the house, but Leo could sleep in peace. So they're so versatile.
Completely. In a way, we had exactly the same with Rufus. So, I mean, Rufus was a rescue. We didn't really know much about his history. But when I put the crate out for Murph, he started going in it. So I thought, oh, he must have been crate trained. Well, he might not have been, but in my head, he must have been crate trained as a puppy. But, there were times where I'd come in, the kitchen or whatever, and Murphy would be asleep on the sofa, and Rufus has taken himself off to the crate or the pen for a sleep. And, it worked both ways. If he wanted a bit of chill out time, he'd just take himself. And I think they also, they naturally learned to separate each, like themselves a little
Yeah.
bit as well over time. And yeah, I think with my two, they're both going to be very different bringing a puppy into the house. I think it's going to be interesting to see how those first couple of days go. Um, I think Coco's going to be exceedingly wary and just keep herself out of the way as much as she can do. Um, and Murphy, I think, having seen him with puppies recently, will be the same. But I think he's almost going to be the fun, playful one
Mm.
eventually, whereas Coco will be the please just leave me alone,
Leave me alone.
which is fine. Nothing wrong with that.
Absolutely. So, what do you think are the main things that obviously I know you're obviously experienced dog owner, but generally, what are the things that you think are important in the run up to getting a puppy? So, I don't know about you, but say for me, it's things like getting the playpen out and putting it up, even if you've got dogs already or not got dogs already, because then you kind of get used to where it, rather than waiting until your puppy comes, then going, right, let's get all this stuff out. You then go, oh, that's a real pain there. Where do I put that? Whereas if you set it up beforehand and like kind of get your groove with the way things are going and furniture, you can kind of test the water a little bit.
Yeah. So I was thinking about this the other day, and it's almost a bit like Christmas where you don't want to put it up too early because then you're like, oh my God, it's not here yet. But equally, you don't want to put it up too late. So I've got his food because we did a big food order, and I'm not going to do another one before he arrives. So his food sat there in the freezer. I think for me, so I get him in a couple of weeks. So I think not this weekend, the one after will be sort of my preparation weekend, which is the week before he arrives.
Mhm.
And I think that weekend, what I plan on doing is having things like some Kongs already made in the freezer that I can just pull out and defrost when I need to. Um, I'm going to, so we've got a room downstairs in our house, which I don't know why we call it the dog room, but the dogs never actually go in there. Um, so it is a nice room that, if it has been a really wet walk, it's got a stair gate on it, so I can put them in there to dry off without getting the rest of the house completely filthy. So I'm gonna pop we're sort of sorting that out at the minute to make it nice and cozy. They've got a sofa in there. There's going to be a crate for the puppy in there. So I'm kind of making that up a little bit to have as a bit of a space where they can all
Mhm.
chill out after a walk. I'm going to be putting the pen up in the living room. I've already got some chews bought. I did buy the wrong size of one chew, so I do need to buy some more chews. But I've got all the chews kind of sorted for when he comes home, which again is something that I didn't really do with Murphy, because
Mm.
I think my knowledge of chews wasn't what it is now. And obviously it's an area that we probably get the most questions on, but I think, looking back with Murph, there were times where I found the puppy biting really hard. And there were times when, it was quite easy to manage, and there were times when it wasn't. And I think, again, in hindsight, he didn't have enough mentally stimulating
Mm.
outlets for how he was feeling and what he needed. So I've got my natural chews ready for him.
And I think that's
Um,
it's underestimated, as you say, chews are underestimated. Chews are so
mm,
valuable. I've always, I don't know how I did it with the others, but whenever I've picked my puppy up, I've always taken a pizzle with me. So they get a pizzle on the way home, which some of them eat, some of them don't eat, but they've got a chew from that moment they come in the house. But I think you're right. Chews are seen as almost like a luxury, aren't they, in a way, for puppies? Something you should kind of limit them. But chews are so valuable.
yeah,
Just to get that
definitely.
de-stressing and puppy biting. I've got a book about puppy biting. Did you know?
Do you? I'll have to grab a copy.
You will. Um, I think puppy biting is probably that's I mean that's one of the reasons why I wrote the book. To be fair, I think it's one of the most misunderstood and first challenges people have with a puppy.
And I don't think I understood it fully the way I understand it now 5 years ago,
Mm.
because I was at a completely different stage of my journey.
Yeah, and
And
it's a painful thing, like
it
obviously
is.
people expect their puppy to pee on the floor. It's going to happen. People expect their puppy to chew something up. They expect their puppy to, you know, do like pick stuff up they shouldn't. They all that's expected. And they expect a puppy to puppy bite, and then they go, this really hurts. And I think a lot of people then sort of think there's something wrong with the puppy almost. It is so misunderstood. And that's why, yeah, I think preparing with chews and having all that in hand ready is so important. And I think that kind of boils down to research is really important, isn't it? If you're a first time, even if you're not a first time owner, but if you're a first time owner getting a puppy, reading as much information as possible from a reliable source
Mm,
and getting as much knowledge in your head beforehand, even if you've had puppies before. I don't know about you, but I still go back and go, right, what do I need to do? Is there anything I need to brush up on? Um,
yeah.
or is there any information about welcoming puppies into existing households or anything? I remember that when I got Dave, obviously my first puppy, we went on holiday the week before we got him, and I spent the whole week reading puppy books. That's all I did. And I made notes, like a bit sad, but I made a training plan. This is how organized I was. I made a training plan about these were the things I was going to teach him. This is what I was going to teach him on week one. This is what I was going to teach him on week two. This was all the stuff, and I stuck it all over the kitchen. Whether it was for my benefit or the family's benefit, I don't really know. Second puppy, I was like, yeah, I'll be fine, because it wasn't new.
Yeah.
But I think it's what that's saying, isn't it? Preparing to, was it failing to prepare is preparing to fail, whatever.
Yeah.
Um, you can't do enough preparation
No.
and reading and getting stuff, because the more you know, the easier the actual journey becomes, and the easier those first few weeks come.
Completely. And they're all so different. I mean, out of interest, obviously, all three of yours came in at different stages, and again, I'm sure it's developed over time, but you've obviously brought all three of yours into multi-dog households, because,
Mhm.
you brought Dave in with Leo, you brought Rem in with Dave, and you brought Fred in with Dave and with Rem. How have you introduced all three of yours?
all in exactly the same way
Have
because it
they?
worked
You
the
haven't
first
adapted
time.
it.
No, I've not adapted it at all.
Interesting.
So what I do is obviously I make sure that the big boys have all had a walk. The adult dogs, maybe not with Leo, but all of them have like had what they need. So they've been out for a walk or whatever early in the day. Go and collect the puppy as early in the day as possible because then they've got as much time as possible to settle in. And then I've conveniently always had my puppies in the summer. So what I do is I get the puppy and I have a puppy in like the soft travel crates. That's what they come home in. And I carry them basically through the house and straight into the garden in that soft crate.
The one I've stolen out of your garage.
The one you've stolen, yeah. Borrowed until I need it again.
Yes.
Um, so I have all the guys in the house and I run the puppy through into the garden. I leave the adult dogs in the house. And then the puppy gets used to the garden themselves. So the adult dogs in the house with whoever's in the house and have an adult. I normally have my mum round as well because she has to meet puppy on the first day. So she's like in with the adult dogs. I then take the puppy into the garden, open the crate and let them just come out when they're ready. And I have just me, normally just me actually, sometimes my husband, and I just let the puppy come out. Once they've come out and sort of had a little wander around, I then let the kids come out, and then everyone kind of sits in the garden and lets puppy kind of just wander around. And I then wait for generally for puppy to do a wee, and sometimes that takes a while. So I stay in the garden with them just getting used to wandering around the garden, meeting each person, wait for them to go for a wee, and then I aim to bring one dog out at a time so that each dog then comes out and meets the puppy one on one rather than having multiple dogs all going, wah. But with Fred, that didn't work. They all came running out and he was like, hi, and he didn't mind at all. But then I very much tell my kids just sit in the corner, ignore him, let him come to you. And I say him because they're always boys. Which they find a bit tricky, but generally they get a little bit of fuss and attention. And then I ask them to kind of move out the way, sit on the bench or whatever. Then while the dogs have their interactions, and I just kind of pan and see what happens. Um, Obviously, I have treats with me to encourage the big boys away, and I very much try and let the puppy lead the interaction. But I tend to do one dog at a time and then let the other dog in and then get the next dog out. So they have like one-on-one interaction. And then once they've done the one-on-one, all the boys come out. And then they all just kind of mooch around the garden a little bit and see what they're doing. And then that's it, basically. And then I spend the rest of the day just in my conservatory. So the puppy only gets used to one room. So we sit in the conservatory for the rest of the day basically until puppy's sort of settled, done wees, done poos. And then gradually I go, right, sort of mid-afternoon, let's go into the living room and then introduce that new space. So
Yeah.
that's kind of my plan. It works. It has worked every time. Whether
Yeah.
that will work again, I don't know. But even if you haven't got a multiple dogs, I think it's a nice way for kids to find the puppy
Yeah,
because
definitely.
I think otherwise it's so overwhelming. Yeah, if everyone comes in like, here's a puppy and they pass it around the room, that's what I say. I like to do in the garden because it's open space and I just let puppy kind of do their thing. They go and pick who they want to say hello to. And it's quite relaxed, I think.
Yeah. It's just another thought's come to me. I need to put a stair gate on the stairs. Um, it's just something I've been thinking about because when I got Murphy, I kind of did very similar with Rufus. So
Mm-hmm.
John stayed at home with Rufus whilst I took a friend with me to go and pick Murphy up. So John was at home with Rufus. So Rufus also did have a degree of separation anxiety. So we felt that both of us going and then both of us coming
Yeah,
back with a new puppy was just going to be too much.
that's
So
fair.
John stayed with him, had a walk with him, etc. And then I came back with Murphy. We took Murphy straight out into the back garden, popped his crate down. He let him out for a wee and to bumble around. Rufus was kind of watching him from the garden window, like, what is that thing in the garden? This is weird. And then we let him out. And I mean, on the whole, Rufus was quite careful. So he kind of, you'll see why I mentioned that. Rufus sort of came out, had a bit of a sniff of him. Murphy was petrified of him. for the first sort of 5 minutes. But again, it was one of those, we kind of didn't, I don't look back and regret it, because we almost didn't intervene. And when I say he was petrified, you know, nothing sort of bad. He just, Rufus had sniffed him and he was like, oh my God, who are you? You're not a big dog that I know of. This is a bit weird, and sort of came and sat next to me. And it was one of those, well, we're just going to, you know, let's just sort of give you both a minute. And, you know, a minute later, he's like, actually, he's all right, isn't he? And they just sort of wandered around the garden having a sniff together. So it was all really lovely. My thoughts this time is I can't decide whether to do the same again and bring him through, take him out. We're quite lucky. So we've got like an L-shaped garden. Our back garden has got a conker tree, but we've got a gate to that garden. So we're not going to go out in the back garden, because conker's obviously not the best for any dog, let alone an inquisitive 8-week-old puppy. So we're going to go sort of into the side garden. To my knowledge, I will double check. To my knowledge, there's nothing harmful in the side garden, but we will do a little scout before, you know, before the day comes. So I don't know whether to take him out there and then bring them out one by one. My other thought is, because my two are quite lively and they can come out of the house into the garden in quite an excitable manner, as you've seen with their doorways and going into open spaces. And I mean, you know, there's nothing wrong with it. They're just very excited. So I don't know whether to do it that way, or to have them already kind of out in the garden sniffing, and then when they're chilled, then bring the puppy. I can't bring the puppy out. I can't decide at the moment. I'm torn between the two based on what's going to work.
It's difficult. It's one of those things, you never know what is the right thing. You never know how it's going to go. You can only just plan. I think with Dave, I always tend to put Dave on a lead just because he's so big and bouncy. Just in case I need to interrupt, but I never need to. But yeah, I think it's always a worry. I don't know about you, but for me and anyone else who's ever had, you know, a new puppy come in, I always have that element of, on the way to collect them, are we doing the right thing? What if they all hate each other? What if one, you know, doesn't get on with the other, and I start having this last minute panic that it's all going to go terribly. And with my last guys, Dave was not keen on Fred for quite a few weeks. And I was like, oh no, it's going to be a disaster. And then they became best friends, so it's fine. But I suppose it comes down to the, you know, experience of the individuals, doesn't it? So thinking about generally sort of bringing in a puppy, what would you say, or what's your thoughts on what is the most important thing, if you can, you know, if you would prioritize any element of training or skill in those first sort of weeks, what would it be?
I was thinking about this last night when I went to bed, actually. So I think, just thinking about sort of training and skill wise, for me, again, probably very different to what I did with Murph, but I think for me this time round, almost top of the list for me this time round is kind of the engagement and relationship and the bond between me and the puppy above anything else. Followed for me by, oh, I'm going through everything now. I think followed for me, well, as you know, for me, things like recall is quite high up on my list because it's an important thing to me. I think lead work's an interesting one, and I'll say why I think it's an interesting one in a minute. But I think in a way I'm going to put more focus on lead work this time, but equally less in a way, and I'll explain what I mean by that. But I think for me this time round, it's very much about the engagement and the focus with me and my puppy. And I think also, you know, obviously 3 springers in, I think I understand them more than I probably did when I got Murph. So I think things like harnessing the skills that they have, and the sniffing and the bringing me things and the retrieving things, and harnessing that far more than trying to stop it. So I think engagement focus, breed specific fun, recall.
That's going to be a busy first week.
It's going to be not all in the first week. Definitely not all in the first week. But I think, for me, there's things that I'm not going to place an emphasis on that I did the first time round with Murph. As I've sort of spoken to people about before, that I think the first thing that, most people do is teach their puppy how to sit. It's not really an
Absolutely.
important thing for me. It's not going to be top of my list. I think that's something that actually just comes generally quite naturally to them. But I think going back to the lead work, I think obviously me and Murph have our challenges with lead work. And I think if I look back to him as a puppy, he's always hated a harness, but he's always hated a collar. Basically, he doesn't like anything touching him. But obviously, unfortunately, he has to have something touching him because he has to have ID on him somewhere. He's hated it from day one. And, if I look back, there are things that I think I didn't introduce it in the right way. I think I probably, again, in hindsight, I probably, did all the things we tell people not to, in terms of, kind of being really big and leaning over him and etc. I think Rufus was always quite barky when it got to going out for a walk time. And, in those early days, I think Murph found that quite overwhelming. Did he associate that with the harness? Quite possibly, looking back, all these things. But I think I put too much emphasis on, once he'd had those second injections, of being able to take him for a walk. And I took walks almost too seriously, if that makes sense. I think this time I'm going to introduce a harness lead in an probably earlier, obviously, because I've got him earlier, but in a way when I don't need it. So before we go out for walks. But I think also just putting less pressure on what a walk is, and, not having that mindset of we're going for a walk, therefore we're going here, but more kind of letting him explore on a lead and making it a little bit more fun, but less structured.
Yeah, I get that.
If that makes
I think
any
there, as you
sense.
say, there is a lot of emphasis on trying to do everything, isn't there? And as you've got to probably got to start training now, and you've got to just train, and you've got to get them to sit, and you've got them to lie down, and you've got to do all these things. I think partly it's knowing what your focus is, in terms of what you want for them for the future. Like I look at all of my guys, and each one of them had a very, very different focus. Maybe I've just got more blasé and less time as they've gone on. I don't know. But my priorities now, if I get, when I get another new puppy at some point, are different. I know with Fred they were very different. And you're right. I think that first few weeks, the most important thing is relationship and just getting them comfortable in the house and not putting too much pressure on things like sit. Just come in time. They're not important to me. I think the thing I teach from the day they come home is, and they're like the training skill, right? If we want to actually give them a skill to learn, is always their name. Because I just find it's the thing that helps so much. Because obviously, puppies get into mischief, but want to separate them from the other dogs. So that's the thing I probably put the focus on in terms of training a skill, is just constantly name, treat, name, treat, name, treat, so that wherever they are, if they hear their name, they come running. That's the thing that I focus on the most. But generally, just getting them chill in the house and just working on that relationship as well. I think we underestimate how long it takes puppies to settle in.
Oh, definitely.
And I think with all of mine, I mean, Dave was textbook. Yeah, if you read the book, that was Dave. He did everything that the book said he should do at the right time, and everything was fine. He slept in the kitchen like a good puppy does, and he was fine. He didn't mind at all. 2 nights, and then he was like, "Yeah, I'll sleep here all right without a peep." And I was like, "Wow, this is easy." Obviously, we know Rem is very, very, very different to that. And then because of how Rem was, I had a completely different experience with Fred. So I've always put the emphasis on I must be able to leave you, and started training that from quite early. And obviously, Rem taught me I couldn't do that. When it came to Fred, I had a completely different approach. And I was like, do you know what? I don't even plan to leave you for 6 months. So I went into puppy ownership thinking, I am not going to leave you on your own for 6 months. Someone will be home with you, or you will be with someone for that time.
Mm.
And he didn't care less about being left when it finally happened. He had had those like 3 months, 4 months to settle into the home, to feel comfortable, to feel relaxed, to build relationships. And then I was like, do you know what? I think I'm just going to pop out. And I think I popped out for about 20 minutes, and he was like, yeah, cool, whatever. Completely different to Rem. And you kind of think, obviously, we always ask ourselves, is that the dog, or is it the method? Is it, you don't know, do you? You
No.
can't, who knows? You could try one method with one dog and one a different, and it's not the method, it's the dog. But I think going into it with a different approach, a different priority, maybe helped. I don't know. But I do think it's very much you learn all the time, don't you? And you kind of do what
Yeah.
works, and you build on those ideas. And you're right, things like, I Fred in my eyes was probably my luckiest puppy in a way, because I had space. I had like our training field. He
Yeah.
came and ran around here from 8 weeks old, um, because he could. So he had so much more freedom, and the no need to be on a lead all the time than the others did. I mean, maybe
Yeah.
that's why he likes to be free. I don't know. Um, but each puppy has a different experience. But I think a lot of pressure is put on training all these fancy skills when they're probably the least important. Because as you say, the harness, the lead, the relationship, all of those things are much more sort of lifelong skills and important skills.
Definitely. Definitely. No, 100%. And like you say, I think just with each dog you learn something new, don't you? And you almost throw the book out the window a little bit, because you go, actually, I don't know if that is going to work for me and for us. And obviously, I think, bringing a dog into the house versus bringing a dog into a multi-dog household, again, is very different because of the amount of time you have to focus on them, on each individual, the dynamics that there are. If you're bringing, when we bought Rufus in, I know he wasn't a puppy, but it's still bringing a dog into the
Mhm.
household. It was just about him and what worked for him. Whereas obviously bringing the puppy in with these two, it's not just about him, it's about what works for him, but also what works for these two as an individual. And it's, there's just different things to think of. And like you say, as a result, I think the priorities of what you put emphasis on change, because my
Mm.
priority isn't, can you sit beautifully? My priority is, can you all get along? And to your point earlier, yeah, I think it's really normal. I already have those thoughts of, oh my God, what if they don't get on? Because these two get on so beautifully together. I have that thing of, oh, Murph isn't always a fan of male dogs. Is he going to like him when he gets to the teenage stage? But then, you've had 6 months of living together. It's a very different relationship to just meeting a dog on the street for 5 seconds and forming an opinion. Um, and I think, as long as everything's done in the right way, I look at people who have got far more dogs than me, and they all get on. And, will they have their arguments? Yeah, of course they will, because as people, we have our arguments. So they'll have their arguments, because they're not all going to get along beautifully 100% of the time, because that's life. And yeah, I think just your thought process just changes very differently. And as I say, this time around, it's very much about him growing comfortable in the house with them and with us, as opposed to, can you sit, can you lay down, can you give me a paw,
Mm.
can you, and there's nothing wrong with those things, don't get me wrong. If that's something that someone finds very important, that's, that's absolutely cool. Everyone's got individual preferences, but yeah, it's definitely a change this time around in terms of what I'm putting emphasis on.
And I think going back to your point earlier about breed specifics is really important, because we've we don't realize that what we do and how we interact creates problems, or associations that then can become problematic further down the line. And obviously we're similar but different. We both have, gun dog breeds. Obviously they have different purposes in a gun dog role and where they've bred from, what their jobs were, but they're still very similar. And I think a lot of emphasis is on, well, we'll take our dog training when they're a little bit older. We'll wait until we'll ride the storm and see how it goes, and then we'll have help when it's, in 6 months' time or whatever. But I think there's a big sort of period of time, that kind of the moment you get them through to whenever you start thinking about training, or whether that be 2 months, 2 weeks, whatever, there's a big period of time where you don't realize it because you think you're just settling in your puppy. But actually, in those first weeks, months until you start working with the trainer, for example, you actually can create an awful lot of situations, some obviously brilliant, others negative. And it's not until you think in hindsight, oh, I shouldn't have done that, that you think, well, maybe I should have worked with a trainer sooner. So obviously, I know Barney's going to be joining puppy class within, like a week of coming home. And that's the point. Even though we are trainers, we still take our puppies to training classes. We still take our dogs to training classes, because it's a valuable space and you get an outside perspective. What would you, thinking any dog, or maybe spaniel specific, I know what the lab specific is, what would you say is the skill or the unwanted behavior that people don't realize they have created in those first few weeks the most? Does that question even make sense?
I think so. For me, I think the big one, and I think this goes across most puppies that we see, but very much so any puppy that has a working line in it.
I think you're going to say exactly what my thing
is stealing items, or
That's
what people
exactly what
perceive
my
as
thing is.
stealing items. And actually, I was looking at this last night because Murph found, I don't know what it was. It was a bit of plastic from, like the top of a bag, like one of those plastic bags you rip off the top of. And he was carrying it around with him for ages last night. And again, I think probably because I'm thinking puppy world, I look back and go, what did I do when he was a puppy? Did I leave him with it, or did I take it off of him? And the honest answer is I can't remember what I did, but it took me over 1.5 years to teach Murphy to bring something to me. So I think in hindsight, I took a lot off him as a puppy, which resulted in how long it took me when I started gun dog training, how long it took me to bring him things, because I'd sort of ingrained in him, well, if you bring me things, it will get taken off of you. And I think this time around, don't get me wrong, there are obviously things from a safety point of view that puppies, dogs can't have. And, again, that comes with two parts. That comes with, we'll make sure they can't get them then, which sounds like a really obvious thing. But, like I mentioned earlier, I've got a conker tree in the back garden. So I've got two choices. I could let my 8-week-old puppy out in the back garden and spend ages chasing him around, making sure he doesn't get conkers, or I could just not let him near the conkers. I'm probably going to go with the latter option because it is easier.
It's easier. Yeah.
But then, you've got the training aspect of, I think this time around, very much you've got something, wow, wicked, brilliant, well done, keep it, bring it to me, whatever you want to do.
Yeah.
Obviously, if it is something that is going to cause harm, then I will, and big emphasis on the word swap, I will swap it with him for something that he can have, because Murph, again, they're very, very different. Murph now is a very keen retriever, he will always greet me with a toy in his mouth because he feels happy carrying things around. Why am I going to stop that? On the whole, it's never something that I need. And on the odd occasion it is, we will either swap it, or I know that he's just carrying it. He's not chewing it. He's not eating it. He's not doing anything. But I think it's probably one of the things I see the most of with people
I
is,
would agree.
puppies will pick up a bit of cut grass and it gets taken off of them. In the grand scheme of things, a bit of grass isn't going to do too much damage to them. If you want to pick up that bit of grass and carry it around, cool, well done, excellent. Aren't you clever? So I think for me, that again is probably a change from the last time I had a puppy.
Mm.
Because on the whole, 9 times out of 10, they're not looking to eat it. They're channeling that innate breed specific behavior that they have of picking
Oh, I need
something
to
up
carry
and
something. Yeah,
retrieving it to you or carrying it around.
I would completely agree. It's the thing that I see as being a problem the most. And I think we don't realize that we've created it. So many people have even adult dog puppies that don't like you walking anywhere near them when they've got something, will not let you take it, will tell you off, will, pick something up and then hide it. And it becomes this massive event. And it is purely because of how we interact with them at the beginning. I don't know, again, I don't know where it came from, but all of my puppies, I've never taken anything off of them. And I don't know if I don't remember. I don't know if I consciously made that decision as when Dave was like the puppy, or whether I just did it naturally. I don't remember. But I know now it's a conscious decision that I never take stuff off of them. And I remember when Fred was a puppy, he picked up a bottle lid and he was playing with it in the barn, and someone happened to be in the barn and they said to me, "Aren't you worried he's going to swallow it?" And I was like, "No." They were like, "I'd rush over and take that off of him." And we had a big conversation about, well, yes, you could do that, but this is why I would recommend you not, because he's going to run away from you with stuff. He'll pick stuff up and take it away. He won't let you have it. He'll then try and eat it quickly because it must be really valuable if you want it. I said, I don't worry about it because he's always picked up stuff. I've always allowed him to. He's never eaten anything in the past. I've never made it a big event. I've just gone, wow, that's cool. Do you want what I've got instead? But not in a pressure fueled situation, in a fun way where he thinks it's him making the choice anyway. And therefore, I'm quite happy for him to pick up stuff. Having retrievers, everything is around my house. I know we always say puppy proof, and of course, you should puppy proof the dangerous stuff. But I find socks everywhere because they get taken out of the washing pile, they get taken off the washing line, they get carried around. It's not an issue. They don't eat them, they don't play with them. They just go, oh, got something in my mouth. And I think that is one of the main things that I see is the biggest, not mistake, but the situation people create without realizing. And I think, yeah, if there's one thing that if every owner came to us beforehand, that would be my top advice. Don't take stuff off of them unless it's dangerous. And if it is, do it in a really positive, fun way to avoid creating this problem that becomes so problematic.
Completely. I think the only other one that comes to mind, and actually on thinking of puppy proofing, another thing I need to write on my list is putting a line of puppy pen panels in front of the stones and pebbles that I have in the garden, because again,
Or a plank of wood over the top of them.
yeah, again, I could fight a battle or I could just make it so that you can't get to them.
Yeah.
And I'm going to go with the second option for now. But I think the second thing as well is jumping up.
Uh-huh.
Now, my dogs jump up at me. I don't care. That's fine. But not every person wants to be jumped up at. And don't get me wrong, that odd occasion that you go out and do something that isn't with the dogs and you want to look semi-smart without paw prints on you, which doesn't happen very often, but does happen occasionally. I
Yeah.
don't want you jumping up at me at that moment. And again, I think if you look at it, puppies are excitable, and 9 times out of 10, jumping up is either, it's exciting. They want to see what's going on. They want to be involved in what's going on. And obviously, when they're little, we let them, you know, and then they get a bit bigger and we go, oh, I don't want you to. And inevitably, a lot of people are told, push puppy down, turn your back on them, which, is a completely different conversation, because you could speak for hours about jumping up in itself. But,
We did
you
on
know,
one of the episodes a few weeks ago. So if jumping up's an issue, listen to a
oh
few
no, look
episodes
back
ago.
at that. But, it causes more problems down
Hmm.
the line. And I think, again, as puppies, there's just so many easy little things you can do so many people are reluctant to just sit down on the floor and play with puppies and, sort
Mm.
of be down with them, if that makes sense. Um,
Down with the kids, hey?
down with kids, down with the puppies. As I say, it doesn't
You're
bother
right. I
me.
think it's
But
kind of a, if it's cute now, will it be cute in a year's time? I think that's
yeah,
kind of the question that you need with puppies, especially. It's what you always need to ask. Is you think, well, they're cute and they're sweet and it's lovely, and you let them do stuff that you don't realize they're then going to carry on doing
no.
forever. So yeah, it's kind of that, always ask yourself, is what they're doing right now something I want them to do in a year's time? If not, don't encourage it, don't reinforce it.
And I think for me, the two subjects kind of go, well, certainly for my dogs, have gone hand in hand. Of You might disagree, because obviously you've kind of known Murphy since since he was a puppy, because when Rem and Murph were sort of puppies is when we got to know each other. So we've both known sort of both of them for most of their life. Murph's never really been a jumpy dog. He'll jump if he is asked, but he's
Yeah.
not really a dog that jumps over you. And for him, I think that goes hand in hand with, when I get home, out of the two, Coco is more likely to be the one that jumps up at me. Murph, I open the door and he goes, oh, Mum's home. Let me go and find a piece of treasure and bring it to her, which in turn brings two things. One, it gives me an opportunity to get through the door, which is fabulous.
Yeah.
But B, he's doing something that feels natural to him, makes him happy. And for him, generally, in turn, when he's got something in his mouth, he's less likely to jump up. But I think also I'm more likely to meet him down where he is. So I think for me, in a way, the two, depending on your breed, almost go hand in hand. Of if they're doing something that is enriching to them, they are less likely to be doing something that you don't want them to be doing. So
Mhm.
go and find me a toy and then we can have fun with it instead.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. I think the other big thing new puppy owners do is forget the importance of rewarding and feedback.
Hmm.
You know, puppies need to know everything. There's so much they need to learn. And the more we reward, the more we reinforce, the more we give, whether it's praise, whether it's treats. I think there's always that kind of, oh, I can't feed them too much. But if you use their food wisely,
Hmm.
that becomes valuable feedback. And I think we can be a bit stingy
Yeah.
and wonder why, oh, well, they're not getting it. Well, because they haven't had that reinforcement, they haven't had that feedback. So I think that's another biggie that, be generous. It doesn't have to be sausages and like unhealthy treats. It can just be their normal food, but use it. Use it to reward them. Give them feedback for every little thing so that it becomes a reinforcing thing. And eventually they won't need the reinforcement because they'll know it gets a reward.
Hmm.
And it will start feeling good to them rather than us having to reward it all the time. But the more we reward, or at least pair things with good consequence, that we can't get back.
Yeah,
So the more we do it when they're younger, the better.
completely.
So we've had a good little chat about puppies. Um, we may well end up having to do another episode when you've got puppy about the things I wish I'd done. Um,
Yeah, definitely. And it may be something that if I try to remember, because obviously remembering things is not always a strong point, is in those first few weeks doing a little kind of blog slash
mm,
diary, to give people an insight of, I mean, they might not care, of, you know, what I've kind of done with Puppy in those first few weeks and how I've structured it.
It's a lot to remember when you got first puppy, though, isn't it?
It's a lot to
Or a new
remember.
puppy.
It's a
Yeah.
lot to remember. You know, the bit I'm not looking forward to is getting up in the middle of the night for a wee again.
Yeah, that's
Maybe
fair.
because it's November. I always seem to get winter puppies. B, I don't do well on broken sleep. But it will be, but no, I'm very excited.
Good. We are all very excited too. Obviously, if anyone listening, if you're thinking about getting a puppy or about to get a puppy, welcoming puppy into an existing household is kind of on your thought process. Hopefully this has been a little bit useful. Mainly I'll just have a little chat about puppies. Obviously you know where we are. If you have any questions about puppies, about to get a puppy, welcoming a puppy, introducing a puppy into a multi-dog household, feel free to get in touch with us, follow us on socials, etc. Join our group, and we can obviously help answer any questions you may have. But thank you for having a chat today about puppies, Tash.
No, it's been fun.
I would say look forward to the episode in a few weeks where we talk a bit more about puppies, real life.
Yeah, definitely. I might look a bit more tired and bedraggled at that point.
You probably will. Thank you very much. And we will see you all next week for next week's episode. Thank you for listening to The Dynamic Dog Owner with me, Debbie Potter. See you next time.